Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Nonprofit Learning Lab for today's workshop. If you have any questions along the way for our presenter, you can type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel, likely on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any tech questions, you can also type them there. If you are interested in using live captions for today's workshop, you can use the link we will send in the chat shortly. If you are interested in receiving the recordings and materials from today's free webinar, you can visit our free webinars page on the Nonprofit Learning Lab website, or you can send us an email at program@nonprofitlearninglab.org. And without further ado, I will now hand it over to you, Randy.
Thank you, Tammy. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you're here. We have a lot to cover in a short time, so we are going to just jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about communicating with the new Congress. So I am Randy Ford, and I will tell you a little bit more about myself and the perspective I'm bringing to this in just a second. But I'm also a member of the Association of Consultants to Nonprofits, which partners with nonprofit learning labs to do some of these free webinars and just a couple of resources that we have for nonprofits that you might want to check into is an RFP service. If you have an RFP and are looking for support from a consultant, that is a free service to nonprofits to reach 150, I think, consultants across the country, as well as you can look up those consultants and browse and see their profiles if you want to just kind of see who's out there who might be good contacts or somebody who could support you. So definitely check out acnconsult.org if you want to know a little bit more about ACN. So a little bit about me, just so you understand the kind of the perspective that I'm bringing to our discussion today. I am a former political reporter in Tennessee, which is where I'm originally from. After that, I kind of fell backwards into working in politics, and I was in DC with a member of Congress for 10 years as his press secretary and then his chief of staff. Now I am a consultant to nonprofits and associations. I'm also a communication coach doing trainings on all kinds of communication, and I'm also a storytelling performer in shows, especially throughout the Chicago area, which is kind of a hobby of mine and also something that I try to bring to my communication and coaching work as well. So these are the things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to do an overview of what the 118th Congress is going to look like. That's the one that starts in January. Some of their likely priorities. Spoiler alert, they're not looking to get things done necessarily. And we'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to talk about what that means for nonprofits. And then I'm going to go through some tips that I want to share about communication and outreach, especially in kind of these very polarized times that we are facing and are going to be facing. And as Tammy said, we will be able to answer some questions. You can drop those into the chat at any point, and we will come around to them at the end and hopefully try to get to as many of those as we might have. So we've got a poll. We're going to do a few polls throughout as well. So here is the first poll that Tammy has open for you. How closely do you and your organization follow Capitol Hill? Some follow it very closely. Some it's not as important. Some it may be that they follow their state legislature. So I'm just curious to see how many people are really actively following on a day-to-day stuff that's happening in DC. And Tammy, as soon as those numbers are starting to show up, if you want to let me know what people have to say.
All right, Randy, it looks like 67% said a lot and 33% said not too much.
Okay, all right. Well, today we will delve into a little bit and hopefully catch some people up if they want to, and also hopefully have some analysis that's of interest to the people who are following every day, like some of us are. Here's the basics of what we know about what's going to happen in the House. So they go into session January 3rd, which is really soon. It's, as you know, the Republicans will be taking control with a very tight margin of 220 to 213. That is not what Republicans were hoping they would have in terms of a margin. They were hoping they would have a much bigger majority. So it is going to be tough for them to get a lot of things done. There's a little bit of disunity within that House Republican conference right now, which brings us to that next bullet point there, the speaker. If you've been following it, as 67% of you have, you know that probably the smart money goes to Kevin McCarthy from California, who's the current minority leader, becoming speaker. But that is far from nailed down. He will need 218 votes on January 3rd. That'll be the one of the first votes that the House takes. And he right now does not have 218 votes. He is still trying to work some stuff out behind the scenes with a few members who are very adamant and very open on the news every day and in the papers every day that they want some concessions and they want some changes in the way the Republican conference works and some rules changes in the House before they will support him. So that's still something to watch. Now, there's no chance that that the Democratic leader, Congressman Jeffries, will get that speaker's gavel because he would also need 218 votes, and that's not likely. So if somebody doesn't have 218 votes, then it would go to a second ballot, at which point I hope Kevin McCarthy would hope that he would be able to get some people around him for that second vote. Could go to a third ballot. It could go on all day. It would be very dramatic because that kind of thing hasn't happened in 100 years or so. So that is something to watch on January 3rd. Again, I think we probably can assume that at the end of the day, Kevin McCarthy will be it, but he still has a lot of wrangling to do to make that happen. Hakeem Jeffries is the new incoming Democratic leader. He was unanimously elected by his caucus once Speaker Pelosi decided she would step aside. That's the overview of what's going on in the House. Now, here's what we know that the House Republicans see as their priorities. They've made it very clear that they want to launch some investigations of the Biden administration, and they want to step up their oversight of everything from how money is being spent in Ukraine and in our NATO ally countries helping with Ukraine, as well as things down to I still haven't gotten my head around exactly what is going on with Hunter Biden's laptop, but they seem to want to dig into that. So maybe we'll all figure out what that is at that point. They've made it very clear that they want to be a check and balance on the Biden administration, especially after they feel that that Democrats did that in the Trump administration. They will want to be taking some symbolic votes on conservative issues. This could be everything from abortion rights. The gay marriage thing has been settled for now, but they will be looking at things that they can do, even if it can't pass. They will be trying to pass things as message points, especially if, as I mentioned, Kevin McCarthy needs to get the right-wing part of his party on board to even become speaker. He will probably be committing to taking up some of those issues. I think early on there's going to be a lot of stuff even related to COVID-19 and maybe some of the conspiracies, maybe some of the origins of that and how that has been handled by the Biden administration and maybe by the Trump administration before that. Usually when Republicans are in control, there's usually a bump in defense spending as opposed to non-defense spending, which is something to note for many nonprofits that do domestic work. Sometimes that is just a way that they try to rebalance or recalibrate the two sides of the spending. So there may be, at least in their versions of upcoming spending bills the next couple of years, some less spending on domestic priorities, which could trickle down to some organizations. And they're going to do whatever they can as the opposition party to block whatever the Biden agenda might be. Of course, the Biden agenda at this point is going to be preparing for the 2024 elections, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Here's the overview of what we know about what's going on the other side of the Capitol. So they also go in on January 3rd for the first day. The Democratic control is 51-49. That was shaken up, well, 2 times last week when Senator Warnock won in Georgia. That's what made it 51-49. Then later in the week, you may have seen that Kirsten Sinema from Arizona decided that she's leaving the Democratic Party, but she is still, it looks like, aligning herself with the Democrats in Washington. So that is, it seems, it's a little volatile, but it seems that the 51-49 is going to hold, which is big for Democrats because right now everything they're in this power sharing agreement with their Republican counterparts, everything from committee seats to office space, they have equal. And so that one extra person means that they will now have a majority on each committee instead of a 50-50 split. They will have subpoena power if they're doing investigations and need to get people there. They will be able to overcome some blocks of nominations, which is one of the priorities we'll talk about in a second. And the leadership here is not going to change. So Chuck Schumer will still be the majority leader, and Mitch McConnell easily won his bid to continue on as minority leader. So no new faces as far as that goes. So these are some of the things that we know that are going to be of interest to the Democrats in the Senate. One is judicial nominations. Because of that 50-50 split, there's been a backlog in some of the judges and other nominations that they have not been able to get through. So that one extra vote is going to help them help them clear that backlog and give President Biden an opportunity to kind of reshape some of the lower courts across the country in a way that President Trump was able to do during his term. And again, they're going to be taking some symbolic votes, things that may be big issues that they can get people on board with, but that probably won't go anywhere in the House because, as you remember, they're going to be focusing on taking symbolic votes on the things that are important to their base. And just like the House Republicans will be trying to block the Biden agenda, anything that is coming out of the White House that's a priority, the Senate Democrats will be looking to give that a boost, even if it's just through collective messaging. You know, really, this is a quote from Peter Sagal on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. The 2022 midterms are finally over and the 2024 election season is underway. It's just so frustrating how quickly it starts. Walgreens keeps putting out their election decorations earlier every year. And so I want to see in the poll how frustrated you might be with the pace and the fact that we're already talking about 2024. But the reality is that is what the next 2 years are going to be. And it's going to be about some of the same personalities that we've been hearing about for years now. And it's really, even before Congress comes in session on January 3rd, it's going to be talking about November 2024, politically and in Congress. So Tammy, do you want to let us know what people have to say about how they're feeling about it?
Sure. So, Randy, 40% said extremely, I need a break. 40% said it's how it has to be, I guess. And 20% said it's not how it has to be, something has to change.
Yeah. Okay. I think kind of they're all correct answers too, because I think that's kind of how we all feel it. Especially, yes, we want a break just for one day sometimes, but it is the way it is. So, um, what does all this mean for nonprofits? So one thing is that there will be opportunities now with all this change to identify new champions. So that might be new members of Congress, whether they are from where you are based or where you do work, or if they are stepping into leadership roles um, that are related to your issue areas. So it would be a great chance to reach out to them and make them champions of your cause. And we'll talk about how to do that in just a minute, as well as new candidates. So one way to use this never-ending election cycle to your advantage is to start to identify those people who are starting to emerge as political, the next generation of candidates, and start to establish relationships there, but staying within what you are able to legally do based on your status. When it comes to spending, the federal budget, this is going to be it's a showdown right now. We have just a couple days until current government spending is up, and we still don't have a bill to continue funding that. So it's already a showdown, and that's with near universal Democratic control in Washington. So with a split government, excuse me, it is going to be even more difficult every time, and it's going to be, with the possibility of government shutdowns. Who knows? Let's hope not that, because it just causes so many problems, as we've seen a couple times in recent years. People are going to be focused on the things that are important to their campaign. So if that is spending money on things that they can message to their base, or if they are talking about things that they can campaign back home about, and that may mean local funding, which sometimes means funding for some of our nonprofits, as you know. An opportunity there when it comes to the budget and spending is that earmarks are back. So this has kind of slowly been trickling back in. The Senate did some earmarks. They're not called earmarks anymore. They're called something like congressionally directed funding. And there's a lot more transparency in the process than there was when really kind of all those scandals happened back in the early part of the 2000s. But now the last kind of group that was holding out on doing this was the House Republicans, and they voted as a conference to start to allow earmarks again. So that you can watch out for those and that process and see if that's something that can be helpful to you. In fact, I'm curious to know, I think there's a poll, I can't see it on my screen, about whether your organization depends on congressional spending or appropriations or earmarks as for any amount of its funding, and if so, if you'll be looking at that over the next 2 years as a new opportunity. So Tammy, how does that look?
67% said some of our budget, 11% said we'd like it to be more of our budget, and 22% said not at all.
Okay. Hopefully there will be opportunities to make it more of your budget, and we'll talk about, again, the outreach ideas that can kind of make that happen. The last thing is the outreach. So some of the communication strategies that I would recommend is, again, the celebration of your champions, the new ones, and the existing champions that you have. as well as storytelling-centered communications. There's a lot going on for people on Capitol Hill right now, and as wonderful as a 42-page white paper is, it is really hard to use that to get down to what people need to know in an actionable way. And so being able to focus on the people that you impact is really an important way to reach the people. And then being on the ready with any rapid response that may come up. You never know when a certain topic is going to suddenly take off in a good way or bad way. Again, the volatility right now and the partisanship on both sides, the polarization means that any topic could ignite any day in a good way or a bad way. So here are some practical tips for communication and outreach. One thing is offer to meet with new and returning members, but especially their staff. I can tell you as a former staff member, it is noticed by the staff if someone only wants to meet with the member, because really it's the staff who are members work very hard, but they have so much on their plate that they delegate to the staff that they trust. And those are the people who are really the important relationships to foster. And then offer to be a resource for them. So the staff members who represent you in either way, if they're literally your representative or if they touch kind of the policy areas that you do, make sure that you are a resource for them and they just know that you're not just there to ask for things, but that if they have any questions, they can come to you. So I'm curious, does your organization have a reliable staff contact in all the relevant congressional offices? And again, this is a staff contact, somebody you have their phone number, email, and can reach out to them. And ideally, they'd be able to reach out to you as well. But the staff relationships are really the ones that matter the most. Tammy, how does it look?
25% said, yes, we know who to reach and they know how to reach us. 63% said, not yet, but we're working on it. And 13% said, nah.
Okay. Yeah, I think right now would be a great time to work on that, knowing that there's a lot going on. So, you may not hear back right away, but I would say over the next few months is a great time to start building those relationships if you don't already have them. Stories, and we talked about this a second ago, so I'm not going to go too much on it, but when you can show what you do and why instead of just telling it, that really makes a difference. So whether that is being able to share videos or bringing in people who've been impacted by your work, those are so that they can tell their stories themselves, either to the member or again to the staff, which is just as important and sometimes more important. That's a very big deal and makes a huge difference. So I'm curious, we have just a couple more polls, but this one, do you have efforts and systems in place to collect the stories of the people that you serve who are impacted by what your nonprofit does? These would be the stories that you would be able to share, not just with members of Congress, but with other organizations and kind of the public at large, donors, all kinds of groups. All right, so I'm curious what those results look like, Tammy.
40% said yes, all collected with permission forms, we share it all. 20% said yes, but we don't have a good way to share them. 30% said some, but we don't know how to use them effectively. And 10% said no, mainly because of privacy laws and guidelines.
Okay. Yeah, I think there are a lot of questions there, and I will, we don't have time to get into all the ways to share them effectively, but I will share my information at the end if anybody wants to chat and just get together and bounce ideas off each other. I'd be happy to do that. Organize grassroots appreciation, so make sure that your supporters, your members, the people you're serving, the people, your volunteers who work with you, also express their appreciation to elected officials and what they give. And then celebrate. One way to show that appreciation is by giving some social media love, going in the press and saying thank you when certain bills are passed or certain votes are taken, and awards. I know this is going to sound really cynical, but I want to show you another quote about how the Oscars got started. I found that the best way to handle filmmakers was to hang medals all over them. If I got them cups and awards, they'd kill themselves to produce what I wanted. And that's why the Academy Award was created. That's from studio mogul Louis B. Mayer, who then got a couple of honorary Oscars himself in the last couple of years of his life. But it is, again, it's a much more cynical way to look at it. But it does help if you have something that makes for a great photo, as you can see an organization did here, that is posted on social media, or that they can use in a press release as well. And be aware of the electoral realities that people are facing, what they're up against, what are their important campaign issues. But again, be careful as to not align yourself in such a way that you're going to alienate some people or violate the tax code that you operate under. And then when you talk to the staff or the members, let them know how they can help you. Like, be very clear with them on what you need, what's realistic that they can help with, and you know, how they can make those requests. So that's a lot of tips there at once, but I think that they are important. And again, I'm happy to talk through with anybody on them one-on-one. If you want to reach out, there is my information, and we have maybe time for maybe a question or two, Tammy, if any have come in.
We do have one question at this time.
Great.
It is, where would you suggest we start if we don't currently have contacts in congressional offices?
That's a great idea. It's a great question. I would say pick up the phone and call the DC office and introduce yourself and say you would like to speak to the legislative assistant who works on blah, 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 whatever is the issue area most closely related to you. And you will get usually forwarded right to them. They may or may not have time to talk right then, but they will be interested to hear from you. So you can also, sometimes some offices may list those contacts on their websites, but I don't think often. But if you just pick up the phone and call, they will definitely get you to the right person. That's a great question.
Thank you, Randy. It looks like those are all of the questions at this time.
Okay, great. Well, I'll turn it back over to you, Tammy. Thank you all. I feel like I talked really fast there because there was a lot to go on that we wanted to squeeze in this time. So like I said, if you want to take a picture of that and reach out to me at any time. I really get excited about this kind of stuff. Separate from, doing it for work, I also just like talking about it. So I would love to hear from anybody who wants to talk about any of it a little bit more. And I'll toss it back to you, Tammy.
Thank you, Randy. This workshop has come to a close. If you are interested in receiving the recordings and materials from today's free webinar, you can visit our free webinars page on the Nonprofit Learning Lab website, or you can send us an email at program@nonprofitlearninglab.org. Thank you so much for participating. And again, thank you, Randy, for educating our community.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.